Basically being downtown. I mean, I grew up downtown. My father had a business that he was here in the dry cleaning business from 1950 until we closed it in 1996. So I was downtown as a kid every day. He also was very active in the fire department. My dad was, Wade Baker. And I was up at the fire station as a small child all the time, right over here, right beside the depot. When I was old enough to ride a bicycle, I rode my bicycle 3 blocks from where we lived to downtown. So downtown has always been a part of my life. It was our playground. At one time, the railroad track here had a bunch of different tracks on it, warehouses all up and down the railroad tracks. We were told not to play around them, but we still did it. You know, you weren't supposed to play on the railroad track, but we'd still go out there and put a dime or a nickel on the railroad track, and hopefully it gets run over. You know, so I grew up down here. When I was old enough to join the fire department, I joined the fire department and was active for 20 years. You know, my father was active for 40 years. So it's been ingrained in me that this is where, this was my place. This was downtown Apex. And it's amazing to watch it over the years. One of the things that my father always said, that downtown comes and goes. It has cycles. Even back in the 50s when you had 4 grocery stores down here, you had a movie theater, you know, he had a dry cleaners. In 1958, he put in a coin-operated laundromat downtown. So downtown was full of life early. And then he said it did a change. And he always said when they paved the road to make it easier to get to Raleigh, downtown changed, because people started shifting shopping and different things like that to go downtown Raleigh. But God bless, it all changed and came back. My wife and I, when we closed the dry cleaners in 1996, decided we owned that building, and we opened up Salem Street Soda Shop. And we operated it for 10 years. Now it's still going, but it's Salem Street Pub. So Apex is amazing how much it is very vibrant now. It's amazing to come down here and see that you can't find a parking place. And that's good. I mean, unfortunately, we need more parking to make things go farther. Back in '96, my wife and I had the building over here on Main Street. And we were out here on the street about 8 o'clock one night, sitting on a bench, and noticed, you know, I could go out there and lay in the street and nobody would run over me. You can't do that today. So it's amazing how much it's changed. I love it. I love the fact that it's as good as it is. So much more is going on. People that just move into town, they need to come down here and see that, you know, this is a very historic area. It's been here for years. You know, little parts of buildings that were finally rebuilt after the place burned down twice. But it's still here. Apex is just still a very vibrant area. My wife and I have actually moved out of Apex. We live just up on Jordan Lake. But it seems like we're still here all the time because it has the things we need. So that's my main thing is living in Apex, growing up here. My 2 children are 4th generation of my family to be born and raised and go to school here. And it might not be that way for them one day, but it's always been very important. My father did not live long enough to see Apex boom. like it did in the early 90s. And I hate he didn't get to see that. Probably one of the most important things I can say is the years that I was an active member of the fire department. The fire department started in 1939 after Mr. Carter Schaub lost a barn with some livestock in it. We didn't have anything like that. If anything was serious, when Apex burned to the ground twice, we didn't have a fire department in Apex. They had to call for Raleigh to come out here. That's mainly the reason it burned to the ground. Also the fact that they were all wooden structures at that time. But I felt like, like I said, I grew up in the fire department. I was running around here as a little boy, because my dad was active. And then when I got old enough, I became a member also. And, for 20 years, we were active doing that kind of stuff. The different things that we had to do as Apex grew. When Sharon Harris Nuclear Plant was put out here, we had to do evacuation plans and all that kind of stuff for that. There's a lot of people that don't even realize that place is out there. It's been there 40-some years now. But when it was first coming, because of ignorance and people being scared, oh gosh, this is a nuclear plant, it's going to be horrible. I don't think there's ever had a problem out there. It just makes electricity. And, if we didn't have electricity, we'd be in bad shape. But that was always an important part of my life. As I got a little older, I realized that it was there for the young guys. One of the things that I think it was important that I was a member of the fire department. I was the president when we decided that we needed to go on taxation and get tax money from the rural area. Before that, the town of Apex funded us a little bit, but we had to rely totally on donations and 2 barbecues a year. And that was when things weren't costing that much. Now a fire truck's $1 million. You can't do it without that. And I think right now Apex has 100 members of the fire department. We did it on about 35. But also Apex wasn't that big. I mean, when we opened our restaurant in 1998, Apex had about 12,000 people. And look at it now. It just amazes me at the amount of people and then how Apex is growing outside of itself. But yeah, that's part of my growing up years. I was in my 20s and married and started having kids, and I was still very active doing that. And I look at now being a totally paid organization. There's no volunteers left anymore. I think one of the last ones died not too long ago. But that's what it was built on totally volunteers. And I think a lot of people don't realize that that's where it all starts, is people in the community realizing there's a need and step forward. I mean, those gentlemen that got together one night and decided, let's do this. We've got to put money into something. And it was some of the old town people that got together and said, we need to start a fire department. Same thing in 1970, I think, when they started a volunteer rescue squad, is that the spirit of Apex has always been, let's volunteer, let's do something. So that's always been important to me. It's because it's my roots. People that are moving into Apex now and love it, hopefully they'll be able to say the same thing, and their children can say the same thing, and their grandchildren can say the same thing. Is that I loved growing up here. It was a great place to be. And 4th generations down the line for them, they can say, well, this has been my roots. Neither one of my children live in Apex right now, but it's still their roots. They grew up here. They went to school here. Both of my kids went to A.V. Balcom to school. They went to Apex Elementary. They graduated from Apex High School. I think that's important, is the kids to have that kind of thing, to have those kinds of roots. And so that's why Apex has always been important. You know, I can remember when they came up with the whole idea of the peak of good living. They put out a little thing about, you know, come up with it, and the town managers at that time's daughter came up with the idea, the peak of good living. And now you see people use it on everything. It's the peak of good living. I've actually been asked sometimes, are you an Apexian? And I says, no, I kind of like to call myself an Apecer. But it's been important. I mean, my great-grandfather came here after the Civil War, before it was being settled. They lived out in the Salem area. And then when he got a little older, my grandfather, his son, B.R. Baker, and his brothers were building houses in Apex. There's still a lot of old houses in Apex that my grandfather and his brothers built. And so he built the house that over on Ellington Avenue in 1908 for his mom and dad. They lived in it until they died. And then later on, my mother and father, Wade and Rachel Baker, moved into that house. And my mother lived there until she died in January for 77 years in the same house. My grandfather also built the house next door that's at the corner of Chatham and Ellington in about 1911. You know, these are houses that are 100 years old. I'm not sure if some of the stuff they're building nowadays is going to be here in 100 years. It might not be, because a lot of times people like to go in and gentrify and tear it down and rebuild. But that's who I am. No matter where I live, no matter where I go in the rest of my life, if somebody says, where are you from? I'm from Apex. And there's a few Apexes around the country. I've looked and everything, but Apex is, most people go, oh yeah, I know where that is. I've heard of it. You know, we were named the best place in the world to live a few years ago. And people started coming. They started coming. But yeah, I just, you know, it's part of me. It's part of my life growing up. My father was very important to me. My mom and dad both were important. They lived here. My dad ran the movie theater here for a little while before he got into the dry cleaning business. And the movie theater burned down in like 52, I believe, 52, I think. He was not working at the time, but he was in the fire department that Sunday morning and remembers it burning up and burning to the ground. So we've been very fortunate since we have a fire department that Apex has never had a major loss. Before that, like I said, burned to the ground twice. But everything got built back brick. I think we're seeing it. As my dad always said, a town will go in cycles as to things moving in, moving out. Businesses coming in, businesses staying, businesses failing. We survived COVID. It looks like it's going to be okay. You know, got a brand new building here in downtown Apex. I hope they fill it up. I know it's, you know, going into business is a gamble in anything, regardless of what you're doing. You know, my wife and I went into the restaurant business. It's one of the hardest things in the world you can do is a restaurant business. But we did well. Had great customers. Met some great friends as a result of that over the years. I run into people now that are older with children that go, I went to the soda shop when I was a kid. you know, and it makes me feel good. But Apex is growing. I mean, not just downtown. Downtown is probably as big as it'll ever be, but everything else is growing. You know, people still coming, still people willing to invest in things. They're buying up properties and building houses, and you know, it doesn't seem to be slowing down at all. And I think it's, you know, we have certain amount of land that we can't grow toward, but Apex is going to outgrow itself, and there's always great potential. I mean, you know, even with downtown, I mean, businesses come, businesses go, and it doesn't seem like you've got an empty building down here. I can remember when there were a lot of empty buildings down here. So, you know, I feel like if somebody wants to start a business, come to Apex and do it. There's so many people here. As long as you treat people nicely and treat them like you want to, you know, business is going to do well. And we've got to have that kind of stuff, and we've got to have that kind of growth. Definitely need to get some more commercial growth in town, you know, along with all the houses and townhouses and things like that, because it's hard to pay all the taxes and to do everything without it. So, but I can remember when Apex didn't have anything. We actually, in the fire department, I can remember looking back on the minutes back in the early 60s where we were broke, didn't have enough money to do anything, but always seemed to have somebody donate something, make a donation, things like that. There was always people that realized how important it was. But yeah, there's no way in the world Apex is ever going to stop. Even since, you know, 1873, it's been growing. It's come and gone. It's done things. I loved watching people come in here and invest in downtown. My father died in 1996, and I really hated that he did not get to see this growth that Apex had. He was a member of the Chamber of Commerce, and he was a big stickler for promoting Apex, you know. And at one time, he had a drop station from the dry cleaners in Cary. Apex was bigger than Cary back then. And look what Cary did. So, Wake County is just a great big place now. The whole county is huge. But if anybody wants to go find a really good place to live, to raise your children, come to Apex. According to my dad, Apex was a pretty wild place when he was growing up. Mr. Kelly, who owned a little place out here that was called where Kelly Road is, Caius Kelly. Mr. Kelly rode around town in a car that he always took the doors off of. Now, Mr. Kelly was a pretty good, robust man. And I guess that's the reason he did it, so he could get in and out really. He also had a cage out there at his store out on Highway 64 that had monkeys in it. And somebody dynamited the monkey cage one night. And I remember my dad telling me about it. And this was before I was born, but Dad told me all about things that went on. It was, you know, a lot of crazy stuff back then, you know. But you're looking at, you know, after the Civil War, I mean, not after Civil War, but after World War II, people came home from the service and life was just different, you know, and things like that. But it started calming down, I guess, because by the time I came along, I was born in 1956, and Apex was pretty calm. I don't remember anything being wild and crazy like that. But, you know, in the evolution of any place like this, when people move in, people move out, you know, there was and I know that if anybody's ever looked at Warren and Toby Holloman's book, there was a small Catholic church, a little place over here on Hunter Street that had a pastor or priest that came in, and he had services there, services one in Holly Springs and places like that. And there were a number of Catholics that lived in the area. My grandmother, Betty Baker, who was Betty Penny at the time, lived across the street. And on Saturdays, she was hired, I guess, I never have understood why, other than the fact that she wasn't Catholic, to ring the bell for that little church when she was like 14, 15 years old. Eventually, it went away. Don't know why. You know, it's amazing how that kind of stuff has changed and how much things haven't changed. Because God bless, we've still got these buildings down here, and people can come down here and walk up and down Main Street and look and say, you know, it's a good place to be.